Most people don't quit when things are hard. They quit when things start working. That sounds wrong. But if you've ever started something, and then disappeared right when it began to stabilize, you already know how true this is. Most people say they quit because they're tired. Because they lost motivation. Because life got in the way. That's just the story they tell after they quit. The truth is simpler, and harder to admit. Very few people walk away at the bottom. People walk away right before things get serious. When the rhythm starts to form. When small results appear. When you realize, if I keep going like this, I might actually have to follow through. And in that exact moment, a lot of people stop. Not because it's difficult, but because from this point on, there's nowhere left to hide. There's a strange phase in every process. It's no longer chaos like the beginning. But it's not success either. Things start moving. And at the same time, a new kind of pressure shows up. Not pressure from the outside. Pressure from yourself. Because now, if you quit, you can't say, "It just wasn't my time," anymore. You've seen proof. You've shown yourself, just enough, that you're capable. And that's when your old identity starts to feel threatened. At the beginning, you're allowed to complain. You're allowed to struggle. You're allowed to say, "I'm trying." But when things start working, that permission quietly disappears. No one takes it from you. You just feel it. If I walk away now, what exactly am I walking away from? Not a vague dream anymore, but a version of yourself that's starting to take shape. And that's where many people turn back. They call it a break. A reset. Waiting for better timing. But underneath all of that, they're running from something very specific. The responsibility of becoming someone new. This video isn't about failure. And it's not about discipline. It's about the moment right before you cross a threshold and choose to step away instead. If you've ever quit right when progress started, sabotaged momentum when things stabilized, or disappeared when the stakes became real, this isn't here to motivate you. It's here to name the fear most people refuse to look at. And if you stay until the end, you'll understand this. You're not afraid of failing. You're afraid of having no excuse left to hide. When things don't work, failure feels external. Bad luck. Bad timing. Not enough resources. But when things do start working, failure becomes personal. Because now, the only variable left is you. Progress removes excuses. And excuses are more comfortable than people admit. When nothing is happening, you're protected by uncertainty. No one expects much from you, including yourself. But the moment momentum appears, expectations quietly move in. Not spoken. Not announced. Just felt. You start waking up with a different weight. A sense that what you do today actually matters. And for many people, that pressure feels heavier than struggle ever did. This is where self-sabotage begins. Not loud. Not dramatic. It looks like missing one day. Then another. It looks like overthinking instead of executing. Tweaking instead of committing. You stop doing the obvious things that were clearly working. And you tell yourself you're being careful, strategic, patient. But what you're really doing is slowing down enough for your old identity to catch up. Your old identity doesn't want growth. It wants familiarity. It knows how to survive as potential. As almost. As someone who could. If things were different. That version of you is safe. It's unaccountable. It never has to prove anything. But once progress starts, that version is on borrowed time. Because consistency forces a decision. Either you become the person who follows through, or you destroy the process before it forces that change. So people create friction. They introduce chaos. They unconsciously reset themselves back to what feels normal. Notice this pattern. When life is unstable, people say they want stability. But when stability arrives, they get restless. Because stability means repetition. And repetition means responsibility. It means doing the same unglamorous things, without the emotional highs of starting over. No new story. No dramatic struggle. Just weight. Carried daily. And that's the moment. Most people mistake discomfort for danger. The irony is this. The early struggle feels painful. But it's emotionally comfortable. You're allowed to fail there. You're allowed to explain. But the middle, where things are working but fragile, that's where the real fear lives. Because from here on, your life doesn't change by inspiration. It changes by who you're willing to become consistently. And that's not exciting. It's quiet, lonely, and heavy. This is why so many people disappear right when things start working. Not because they can't handle difficulty, but because they're not ready to carry the weight of a self that can no longer hide. The Stoics never talked about comfort as a goal. They talked about capacity, not how good life feels, but how much weight a person can carry without breaking. Because real freedom doesn't come from avoiding burden. It comes from choosing which burden is worth carrying. When things start working, life offers you a trade. You lose emotional comfort. You lose excuses. You lose the chaos that used to explain your limits. In return, you gain responsibility. And responsibility feels heavy. Precisely because it's real. No drama. No audience. No validation. Just you, showing up. Doing what needs to be done. Whether you feel like it or not. That's not inspiring. But it's stabilizing. Most people misunderstand this moment. They think the pressure they feel means something is wrong. They think anxiety is a signal to stop. To pull back. To regain balance. But what they're actually feeling is their nervous system adjusting to a larger load. The same way weak muscles shake when they're finally asked to carry real weight. The discomfort isn't a warning. It's calibration. There's a difference between pain that damages and pain that strengthens. Early struggle hurts because you're lost. Middle stage discomfort hurts because you're growing into something narrower. A smaller margin for error. Fewer exits. More consequence. And most people panic when exits start closing. They mistake options for freedom. But options are just indecision. Wearing a nicer name. Freedom begins when certain doors close. When quitting becomes expensive. When walking away costs you a version of yourself you respect. That's why responsibility feels threatening. Because once you accept it, you can't unsee what you're capable of. And you can't go back to the comfort of not knowing. The Stoics understood this. They didn't chase ease. They trained endurance. Not to suffer unnecessarily, but to remove fear from effort. Because the person who can carry weight without collapsing is no longer controlled by comfort. They're free to act, free to stay, free to finish. So when things start working, and you feel pressure rising, that's not a sign to escape. That's the moment life is asking. How much responsibility Are you willing to accept for who you could become? Most people answer by leaving. Not because they're weak, but because they've never been taught. That burden is the price of freedom. Let's be precise about the fear. It's not fear of failure. Failure is familiar. Most people already know how to survive failing. They know how to explain it, how to rationalize it, how to live with it. What they don't know is how to live without excuses. When things start working, your life quietly asks you to upgrade your internal standards. No one announces it. No one gives you a ceremony. But suddenly, you can't blame the system as easily. You can't hide behind "someday." You can't pretend you don't know what you should be doing. And that's terrifying. Because ignorance is comfortable. Clarity is demanding. Clarity says, "You know what to do. Now do it." This is why people unconsciously create problems. Right when things stabilize, they pick fights. They change plans. They add complexity. Chaos feels productive when you're afraid of commitment. Because chaos gives you motion. Without direction, it keeps you busy. Without forcing you to become precise. Notice how often people say, "I just need to feel ready." Ready doesn't mean capable. It means emotionally safe. But growth never feels safe to the identity you're outgrowing. So the mind looks for exits. Not dramatic ones. Quiet ones. A missed week. A delayed decision. A slow fade. And eventually, the progress you worked for dies quietly. Not from difficulty, but from avoidance. There is a line most people approach, but never cross. It's the line where effort stops being heroic and starts being expected. No applause. No novelty. No rush. Just repetition. And repetition is brutal to the ego. Because repetition doesn't care how inspired you feel. It only responds to who you show up as daily. This is where fantasies die. Not because they're impossible, but because they require a self that no longer gets to escape. At this stage, progress demands something specific. Reliability. Not intensity. Not motivation. Reliability. And reliability feels boring to a mind addicted to emotional spikes. So people sabotage consistency to regain feeling. They confuse excitement with meaning. But meaning is quieter. Meaning feels like weight. You stop noticing because it's always there. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't want success. They want the feeling of becoming successful. They want movement without consequence. Growth without obligation. But real progress removes choice. It narrows your life. And narrowing feels like loss. Until you understand what it gives you in return. When your life narrows, your energy concentrates. When your options reduce, your power increases. But only if you stay. Only if you don't panic. When comfort disappears. So if you've noticed this pattern in yourself, starting strong, making progress, then disappearing, right when things begin to solidify, don't label it as laziness. Don't call it lack of discipline. That's not honest. What you're feeling is the weight of becoming someone who can no longer hide behind potential. The old version of you survived on excuses. The next version survives on responsibility. And only one of them gets to stay. This is the point where most people turn back. Not because the road gets harder, but because it gets quieter, more serious, more real. No audience. No drama. Just you. And the consequences of staying. If you disappear when things get serious, that's not fear of failure. That's fear of becoming someone who has no excuse left. And the question isn't whether you're capable of more. The question is, are you willing to carry the weight of the person you already know you could be?